which is a panel. So one of the great things about our event is that we partner with some great rural organisations. It enables their people and their members to have a voice as well, and to bring a rural voice to our events, and to this event in particular, with a topic that is really important to them. So we've got a panel now where we're going to talk to them about what's happening in rural. So our 5 panelists, and we're going to go around and introduce them in a moment. We'll give them 5 minutes to talk about their organisation, but also around the issues and topics that their members are talking about in relation to rural connectivity. Fiona Gower is the President of Rural Women New Zealand. Dr. Sarah Clark is a member of the Council of the Rural Health Alliance of Aotearoa New Zealand. Rachel Heskew is one of the trustees at Dairy Women's Network. Trevor McIntyre is the GM Pathways at New Zealand Young Farmers. I hope I got that right, Trevor. And Andrew Hoggard, who is now the President of Federated Farmers. So let's stop the poll. And stop the share. And we will start with asking, we're going to go around the panel. We're going to ask Fiona to go first because that's just the run sheet that I've got. So Fiona, if you want to start with your 5 or 7 minutes on the topic.
Thank you, Craig, and tēnā koutou katoa. It's great to be here with you today and to be on this. Thank you so much, Craig, for putting this together. I know it's been quite a hassle over the last little while working out how to do it. COVID's really thrown the spanner in the works, but you've pulled this together really, really well. So it's been really interesting to hear the comments the last few days about what's happening. So Rural Women New Zealand has been around since 1925, supporting our rural women, their families and their communities, especially around the areas of isolation and health, education, social issues and environment. So the connectivity section really fits in really well with what we do. Just a few comments to say, you know, it's wonderful to hear about the RBI2 and how far that is progressing, and hearing about from Minister Farfor yesterday in the RCG. So that is good to hear. There's really good progress being made there, but there's still work to be done. COVID certainly showed to us the importance of connectivity out in rural. As a mother of 2 children, trying to get homeschooling done or schooling from home was quite a challenge. We're actually on copper, so every time I'd have 3 computers and the phone ringing, we just couldn't work on it. So many of my Zoom calls were taken up the top of the hill, where I can actually get cell phone coverage because there is none in the house. So I think I had the best view from my office in the country while I was having those calls. So that is one of the great parts of being out in rural. And certainly having the tower that we have now, living close to where I do at Port Waikato, has made a huge difference to what we can do out in that area. So thank you for putting that up. It's not only about education that we need the connectivity for, it's also about having the health connectivity for health issues, and I'm sure we'll hear about that as well from Sarah. It's also about keeping connected, and we certainly saw that over COVID, how important it was that we could connect to each other and keep us so we weren't so socially isolated. One of the interesting things that we've been talking about recently is with the Climate Change Commission, and how the importance of connectivity can help and work in with the climate change and what we can do to mitigate and adapt. And part of it is the need for connectivity, because if we can actually connect and do a lot of our business online, we're not having to travel, we're not having to take our cars out, we can actually do it from home. And this could be telehealth services, it could be social health services, it's education, all that sort of thing is really, really important that we can do that online. We've actually found another issue lately, which I really need to point out, is the need for education, both for those of us that don't have connectivity and for all of those out there who think that all New Zealanders have really good ultra-fast broadband connections and all have cell phone coverage. Because we get that a lot, that the assumption is that because they have it, we have it, and it can be a real issue for us having to explain that, well, actually I haven't got your message because I haven't been to town for 3 days, and things like that. And one thing we've found is around the use of checks. Because of the use of internet banking now and all those mobile services, there are people out there in rural without that rural connectivity, without that ability to connect, and they can't do their bills. If we lose checks, they will really be struggling. So we're looking at how we can work with that and what ways can we make it easier for those people that still don't have that connection, and that digital divide is a really important point. So there's a lot we're working on at the moment about all sorts of issues. We'd really like to see how we can make that work better and how we can work to bring those services out into our rural communities, because they are really important. And listening to Chris talking about emergency services, absolutely, health and safety on our farms. If we don't have cell phone coverage and we can't reach our landlines, how can we get help? And we've seen that through things like the earthquakes. We've seen it in times of car accidents or vehicle accidents, on farm accidents, or if there is some domestic violence, or if there's violence in the home and we have to leave, how can we call for help? How far do we have to go? And that's a really big thing for us, is that health and safety. So there's a lot there, but we're really pleased with the progress we're getting. But you know, like everything, we'd like to see it more, we'd like to see it better. And at times I must be over COVID, I was still running at dial-up speed because of the use of connectivity. But as I say, I've got the best office in the world when I can stand on top of the hill, so it's not all bad, but it certainly would help all our businesses to have better connectivity, because we can do more with our businesses. And we heard yesterday about the importance of that to getting our businesses, to getting people out into our rural communities to work and to live and to play. It's really important that they have those options to be able to still connect when they're used to in town. So on that, I will leave that. Kia ora, thank you very much for having us on today.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you, Fiona. Before I introduce Dr. Clark, I've just read something in her bio that's just I hadn't noticed before, and it's just a little bit interesting. So I've been watching on Amazon Prime the Eco Race in Fiji, and if you haven't seen that program, then have a look. It's amazing what they get up to. But Sarah's first line in her bio is that she's a senior rural doctor with experience ranging from emergency medicine to expedition medicine, which sounds really interesting. Not the topic today, but that must be in remote and rural areas as well. So Sarah, we'll hand over to you.
Kia ora koutou, and thank you, Craig. Yes, expedition medicine does tend to be in very remote areas, and I was just listening to Chris's comments about the need for connectivity in these remote locations. It's about where people go, not just about where people live. And most of my expedition experience has been in Antarctica, so they're very much reliant on line of sight a lot of the time, and where are the satellites. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. I'm here representing the Rural Health Alliance Aotearoa New Zealand, which is an organisation of member organisations, if you like, who have an interest in perhaps live or perhaps serve rural communities, so and interested in health. So I am a rural doctor, as Craig said. I've worked across hospital sector, across primary care, across the Pacific, across New Zealand, a little bit of Australia, so lots of little bits of everything, and I've certainly worked in some pretty small places. Today I'm sitting in Kaitaia and hoping that my internet is good enough to manage this video Zoom. So I guess when I got offered the invitation to come here, I thought, what on earth am I going to talk about? There are just so many things. So I'm really going to focus on my COVID experience, and hopefully that will draw some of the themes that we've already seen coming through. So I found out about that COVID was a thing that was likely to affect us here in New Zealand around about February, March, and I ended up locked down in Rolleston near Christchurch and working in Ashburton through that time. So usually I work all over the show, including here in Kaitaia, but that's where I ended up for lockdown, and became quite heavily involved in the COVID response. And connectivity became so critical. Not only were we needing to be connected to send information about how to set up a COVID assessment clinic, about how to manage COVID if we were seeing it, what to do, how to do the tests, all of those sorts of things. There's lots of emails, several hundred a day at one point, coming through. We also needed to be able to speak with one another, and there were several situations, especially around lockdown, where cellular networks seemed to fail where we were. Fortunately, we were able to go to other things like WhatsApp, use of Wi-Fi became quite important for communicating with my practice colleagues, with sometimes my patients. And we just really had to use number 8 wire and find whatever we could to get the messages around, because we were running as fast as we could to get everything done. The other thing that happened for us, I was working in general practice in Ashburton at the time, was our practice went from 100% almost in-person consultation to virtually more than 90% video or telephone consultation over about, I think our aim was 48 hours, but it took us about 72 to get there. So we had medical students delightfully running around setting up the docs and nurses with their technology, getting everybody ready to work from home, making sure everyone had devices, and also making sure everyone had the connectivity that they needed. A mixture of running down to the supermarket and buying what we call burner phones, so cell phones that we could throw a data pack on for people who didn't have internet at home, so that they could still jump on a computer and work. Getting our doctors used to using video for not only for consulting, but also for talking to one another. So we had our staff meetings every morning that way. Getting everyone familiar with Zoom, finding the way that people interact with technology was really fascinating. But I think the key was we were super fortunate in that we were able to remain connected, and we had a practice population of 10,000. So for us, if we weren't able to connect with our patients, that would have been an absolute catastrophe. So it's been super critical. So aside from the consulting, so we were seeing patients maybe on video, working out which ones needed to come in person, making sure that we were keeping everyone as safe as we could, and triaging what we call digital first. So making sure that the people who did come in really needed to, we could manage our lower risk patients from home. We were also trying to keep our medical students in the mix, keep them being taught, because at the end of the day, in a couple of years' time, they're going to be doctors, and we hope that they haven't lost too much education opportunity. So we used 3-way video consulting with patients, and then lots of 2-way video with the students to make sure they've still got their education. Lots of Zooies. I'm sure you're all familiar, Zoom Hooies. And the opportunity for education and CME by video just really exploded. So it seemed that lots of organisations who were already used to providing medical education just really came to the front. And one that comes to mind is we just set up with Mobile Health our rural medical education monthly lunchtime sessions, and we continued those. I think we missed 1 month when it was very busy, but we continued those throughout. More and more people started to join as people became socialised to the idea of using Zoom. More and more webinars became available. It becomes a way that you can connect and learn, and also like this forum, you can ask questions, you can interact, and if you don't have chance to be there at the right time at the right day, you can watch it later. And you know, that's really expanded our access to education, especially for rural people. Earlier Fiona mentioned travelling. I think that's such a critical thing for people who live rurally. So education, we were having all of our meetings and our education sessions on Zoom, and then lockdown kind of ended, and then next thing I get my next invitation and I have to go to Christchurch for it. You sort of think you've just turned my 1 hour meeting into a half a day off. And that's how many patients I can't see that day. So I think as a rural person, I think it's really important that we keep the gains that we've made, that we keep reminding people that actually, while connectivity has got its issues in some places, actually sometimes being able to shoot down to the local school or to the local, wherever you can get Wi-Fi at the library, is a lot easier than having to go to the nearest city to be in person for a meeting that could be easily done on Zoom. My next topic I've got is rural health shortages. I think we're all aware that not every location in New Zealand is well served by physical health professionals. I had a couple of stories told to me about people who've accessed health services through lockdown and who've been able to essentially get through to someone straight away. essentially get their problem dealt with straight away, rather than have to come in and sit in a waiting room for an hour and a half after having driven for an hour and a half and then get a prescription and take it to the pharmacy. They were able to make one trip, or even potentially have someone else make the trip for them, just to pick up the medication they needed at a pharmacy. So the systems really improved, and they improved overnight. They relied on connectivity with patients, be that by video or phone, then the ability to prescribe. Often we were at home and we're prescribing to pharmacies that were in different sites, and then the ability to get that information back to the patient so that they know when to come and pick up or do their blood test or whatever it was that they were needing to do. So many people I know have said it's completely changed the way they'll interact with the health service. I've heard people saying, I'm going to demand my medical practice offer this service in future because it saved me so much time. And the other thing I think that comes to mind is mental health. I think Fiona touched on connectivity. I know informally our Zoom meeting became a Sunday afternoon drinks meeting as well. So we have a beer at 5 o'clock on a Sunday. That kept us sane and in touch with our mates, which was cool. And from a more formal health perspective, it seems mental health is becoming something that people are able to access services from the comfort of their couch at 2 in the morning. And we're seeing different applications pop up that people can use. Some of them are human-based, as in someone on a video. I'm seeing people from different time zones who are offering services here in New Zealand now. So if you are wanting to see someone after work, then that's okay. You don't have to sort of fit into their structured appointment system during the day. I think mental health is going to be a huge issue. We're already seeing it now, and it's certainly likely to increase as COVID recovery continues. So that's another way that we need to make sure that we can keep people really connected, and really critical for rural as well. I think
you've got your 5 minutes up, Sarah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's all the topics that I've picked up on. Thank you very much. And yeah, kia ora koutou, thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Perfect timing for both of us. Remember, people, you can put Q&As in the question section if you have questions for anybody. But we'll keep going. So far, we've heard from Port Waikato, we've heard from Kiri. And I think, Rachel, looking at your bio, you're somewhere south of Rotorua, but you may not be there today. So I'm going to hand over to Rachel, who is a trustee with Dairy Women's Network.
Kia ora, thank you, Craig. I am south of Rotorua today in a really lovely spot called Redefakaitu. So thank you very much for having me on your panel today. It's an honour to be included and to bring the voice of Dairy Women's Network and represent the 11,000 members that we have around the country, from Kaitaia to Bluff. We also have 100 regional leaders that are based out in every region of the country, predominantly dairy farming women and rural professionals. So rural connectivity and the accessibility and affordability of these services are sort of front of mind for many of our members. I'm a farmer myself. My husband and I farm in Redefakaitu, just as I've mentioned. We're 30 minutes south of Rotorua and about 50 minutes north of Taupo. So sometimes it can feel very remote. And certainly I've lived a lot closer to urban areas and farmed a lot closer before, but it's a very idyllic place to live, to raise a family and to farm. And I've got a young family, and I'm involved in our local community, our local play centre, and I sit on the board of trustees of our local school, of which we have a roll of 80 children at the moment. So I wanted to bring, I was thinking about, what perspective would I bring to your panel today, and I wanted to think about something complementary but also unique. And I thought the best way I know how to do that is to share with you, give you a little bit of an overview of how reliant our farming businesses are on good digital connectivity today. And the best way to do that is just to share with you my own business and how we use internet. Now, I sort of sat down this morning and reflected on this, thinking it would be perhaps a 2-minute exercise to jot down all the ways in which we rely on good services, but it actually took me a lot longer than that. And I went onto my smartphone and I stopped counting at 35 apps. And that was sort of apps that I use, on a regular basis. Some of them I use day to day, some of them we use weekly, some a little bit less frequently than that. But just sort of thinking about what a modern dairy business is today, I use online banking to pay all my bills. I use Xero for accounting, Figured for budgeting, and all of that information is stored in the cloud. And I rely on having regular access to that to stay on top of the numbers in my business. We're relying on communications through email constantly, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, social media, things to stay in contact with those in our communities. Also those within our farm team, we'll use sort of WhatsApp and Messenger to communicate with each other. If I'm involved outside the farm, I've already heard lots of talk about Zoom and Microsoft Teams. We're very heavily reliant on that to connect, particularly as we've heard already through lockdown. That became incredibly important. I spent a heck of a lot of time on Zoom, as many of you did. I use now a payroll app to manage wages and salaries for my team and leave entitlements and things. So that's quite a new thing that's become available, but we've picked that up in our business pretty quickly. And just to make a comment about that, I would consider my husband and I not to be early adopters of everything that's available to us in our business, but certainly over the last 5 years, I would say that the pace of which we've had to pick up new technologies and integrate them into our businesses has become very, very rapid. And now reflecting on it to share with you, it's quite astounding. There's not one area of my business that doesn't rely on storing data or getting access to data in a digital environment. So we use an online roster to manage our team and our work planning on farm week to week. We've recently installed security cameras, and that's all digitally enabled. From a health and safety perspective, we use our cell phones to keep in contact with each other, and that works for 3/4 of our farm. There's a small part towards the back of our farm, very close to the forestry, which is in the shadow of the line of sight from a repeater on the top of a Rainbow Mountain, which is where we connect at the moment. So I have one of my team members that lives out that way, and she's got no access at all. So when she's over there at home, we can't connect with her very easily using our mobile phones. From a day-to-day farming operation perspective, our cow shed is now Wi-Fi enabled, which absolutely blows my mind when I think about it. Imagine talking to our grandparents or those farmers of that generation about what it takes now to run a farming business. I think I quite often say that people are our greatest asset in farming, but now I add to that and I sort of say that this here is the most important tool that we've got on farm, a smartphone or an iPad. We have automatic drafting, so that helps us manage our herd movements, for example, and we use an iPad to load up cow numbers and punch through what sort of draft mob we might need. Now, we had a really interesting situation through calving. It's a very busy time on farm at the moment. We've just been calving and our internet went down for some reason. Quite often we won't know why that's happened, but we've got to respond. And it put enough pressure, or it put a lot of pressure on the team that day. It took a lot longer to draft up our newly calved cows. And looking back on that, it was almost more stressful than what the weather can do for farming. And we all know how challenging that can be at times. But when we are so reliant on digital services and they go down, it's a tremendous pain in the rear end, and it's interesting because my husband and I are old enough to remember how to farm without technology, so we can pick it up and manage our way through with extra time. But we've got a younger generation coming through. I've got a young dairy assistant who's 18, and her go-to is her smartphone and all that's available to her. So when she loses connectivity, she really doesn't know where to go. So I thought that was a really interesting insight. I think these issues are only going to be more and more important for the younger generation of farmers coming through. So we're farming and making complex decisions in real time today on our farms, and you know, it's absolutely critical that we continue to invest in the reliable and affordable infrastructure and accessibility for all of our communities. You know, I can't sort of emphasize that enough about how important it is. I mean, we're, as a country now, you know, we're looking to our farmers, our food producers, and our primary sector to help us at a very difficult economic time. And our farmers are up for that. You know, they always have been, but we've got to give them the tools that they need, the infrastructure to help them do that. And I'll just share with you some of a letter that Dairywomen's Network recently put forward to our Minister of Broadcasting, Communications and Digital Media, the Honourable Chris Barfoy, because it's got some really interesting numbers in there, which when I first saw it surprised me, if I'm honest. It may not surprise some of you, but we asked our membership 3 questions. You know, are you happy enough with your internet cell phone coverage? And the answer to that was a resounding no. 78% said that they didn't have what they needed, and in some cases they didn't live that rurally. So I thought that was a huge proportion of people that don't have what they need in terms of digital connectivity. The second question on that was, do you use cell phones and apps as on-farm tools? And 85% of them said that they tried. Yes, they did, and they tried to, and they used what they could. So a little bit, you know, like me, like what I've already explained about how reliant we are. And the third question there was, does internet speed challenge your business? And 75% responded with a yes, absolutely. So those are quite high numbers. I think that's yeah, very interesting. So the other comment on that was that in Dairy NZ's most recent survey, they found that 50% of farmers said they don't have access to the broadband internet they need, and 52% don't have adequate mobile reception. And Dairy NZ have come out and said that it's top 4 in a list of 10 priorities for farmers and farming businesses today. So it's a pretty critical issue.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. Really appreciate that. I'm going to hand over to Trevor McIntyre, who's the General Manager of Pathways at NZ Young Farmers. Hello, Trevor.
Kia ora katoa, everyone, and thanks very much for the invitation to be here and share with you today. Yes, I am General Manager of Pathways at New Zealand Young Farmers. I've come from a farming background and an education background, and have been working with New Zealand Young Farmers, particularly with their school engagement project, which has been supported by the Red Meat Profit Partnership. But also the field staff that work with our clubs and our teen ag clubs and schools are part of my team as well. So we've got around about 4,500 members in 80 clubs and 120 schools that run the teen ag clubs across the country. So we've got a very wide network of young people across the country. My background, brought up in a very remote rural area, Lincoln University, attracted into education. Spent some time but got involved very early days of the wild deer capture and decided to go farming the animals. And the first year I farmed in 1980, I won a computer on a TV show, and I've had a computer in my house ever since for the last 40 years. So I have a real interest in digital technologies and how they relate to the rural sector and also to education, obviously. From a young farmer point of view, there's a number of things really that are factors for us. And I'll just relate a story about an organisation here in Christchurch who decided to run a camp in North Canterbury, adjacent to the Waimakiriri River, which is not out of the way that much, of inviting young urban people to come and to go into camp and then to visit some farms and get involved and attracted to the farming sector in the region. They got out to the camp and there was no digital technology or no reception of any description, and half of them went home. and never even stayed to have a look at the opportunities that they had. And so, and the others that stayed on in the review of the program indicated the lack of digital connectivity was a real issue for them. So these young people, particularly urban young people, walk around with a cell phone connected to their hands. And so the prospect of going to a job somewhere where they cannot be connected is really off-putting for them. And so I think that's a real factor, particularly in the current climate where we're trying to attract, because we're not going to staff our primary industries with young people from rural areas who understand the possibility of being disconnected. We are going to need young people from those urban areas to come out, and that's a really negative factor for them. Within our club network, that obviously a big part of young farmers is the social connections. You know, I think I'm the oldest young farmer as a staff member. We have to join the organisation. I'm the oldest young farmer in New Zealand at the moment, but I also joined young farmers when I was at school in Southland, and so I've been involved with young farmers off and on over the years. And certainly across all that time, the young farmer network has been very much a social network, a connectivity point for many of our young people who live often in very isolated areas. And as we've moved into the digital age, of course, that connectivity and social connection is becoming increasingly important, obviously. So the ability of these young people to access the social networks that they do through digital technologies is being severely handicapped by the inavailability of a network to them to be connected. The agri-tech sector, many of our young people are drivers for new technologies. They embrace it, they love it, they want to be involved in it, and yet in some places they're keen to do that. And in fact, in some cases the property owner, the farmer, is keen to let them loose on it, but the technology is not there for them to get excited about. And I think that's a real loss to lose that enthusiasm for the digital technologies. We're looking at developing a social platform across young farmers that is a digital platform that's accessible by all our young people. But again, it's going to be selective in our members who can actually enjoy that and join that. Through COVID, we learnt some really valuable lessons, and that was that we could keep going. In fact, we continued as a business. We had our young farmer members on farms carrying their cell phones, short videos. We put a set of questions to them and we distributed them to all the high school students that are in our teen ag clubs, and they loved them. So we had a really nice network going there. But so those are the factors that we're interested in, certainly from a young farmer point of view. So thanks for the opportunity to share those with you.
Thank you very much, Trevor. And I presume you're coming from Christchurch, are you?
Yes, I am.
Okay. That's all right. We're just going around the country, and I think we're heading back towards Taihape, or that's at least the general area I think Andrew is in, but he can tell us exactly. So Andrew Hoggart is the National President of Federated Farmers. He's been involved with this event for several years. And so Andrew, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm actually in Wellington today, which is weird because my internet is worse here than it is on the farm. And yeah, it's cutting. You will have seen me disappear off not so long ago. Managed to, yeah, I don't think our CEO might have not paid the internet bill or something. But I'm all sorted now. Look, I just wanted to I'll touch up on a couple of key things of where I see the importance of connectivity going in the future. And apologies if there's someone with a jackhammer across the road. So if you hear the background noise, I can't do much about it. But if anyone knows Bob Jones, if they could ring him and tell him to just make his crew quiet, that would be useful. And the other thing I've got, just to put off the press, our Federated Farmers internet latest connectivity survey here. So I'll just go over some of the stats from that. But, you know, I'll just start actually with COVID. For us as a business, it wasn't too bad. We'd thankfully upgraded our IT at Feds, just like in the month or so before. Got involved with Microsoft Teams and all of that, so we were able to keep working fine. Actually, we saved a fair truckload of money because no one was flying anywhere. Everyone was sitting at home, and we were able to keep doing what we needed to do. I think the challenges for us were with particularly because the lockdown happened at the same time as a really bad drought, was helping those farmers that needed that help in the Hawke's Bay. Normally you'd do things like drought shouts, etc., to sort of lift up spirits, whereas it just wasn't possible this time. And so that was quite a big challenge for us. And I think the other thing we found during COVID was a lot of people went back to the farm for lockdown. So we had, noticed that farmers' kids that had perhaps gotten a job in town, they all flocked back to the farm, and they still kind of tried to do their jobs connecting. And all the kids back from boarding school trying to still do their distance learning, and it put a huge strain on the services out there. And we were getting quite a number of calls from members that were absolutely struggling with connectivity. I recall someone from Taihape, actually no, just north of Taihape, actually at Oakuni, and they were trying to do their GST return, and they were needing to go on at about 1 o'clock in the morning to be able to get enough bandwidth to actually do the GST return. And even then it was still a struggle. So it really did highlight that, whilst in sort of peacetime, the network can work in places reasonably okay. It's still not great, but it's getting better. But when we put that strain on it, it really did sort of crack a little bit. In terms of, and I guess just one other point I'll cover there is, we're getting a lot of comments from, there's certain parts of the country where just everything is poor. The internet connectivity isn't great. The landline is falling to pieces, and the mobile is non-existent. And there is a worry, it's not a big chunk of the country, but there are just certain parts where nothing is happening for the connectivity is going backwards for them. And it's really important that, I think going forward with any sort of spending around connectivity, it needs to be targeted to get some of these people that are missing out big time, just get them up to a basic standard. If I'm looking forward as to particularly federated farmers, what are the challenges? Well, it's obviously essential fresh water is the big one that's taking up all the oxygen, all the noise right now of farmers being concerned. Now, one of the solutions that's probably going to be in that space in terms of not needing to have people out with clipboards and rulers measuring hoof prints and sort of other ridiculous things will be the use of farm plans, and the fact that these farm plans can be audited and verified. And to me, this is only going to work if we've got decent connectivity. That, farmers are already capturing lots of data that would be required, but the data needs to move in a very seamless way. We need to be able to send that data off into some sort of central location, and then various, into aggregators or whatever are able to pull that together for plans, use farmers' input, and be able to verify it digitally or audit it digitally without the need for huge expense in this area. And so, if we're going to want to see our farmers are up for the challenge of, we all want better water quality, we all want to be able to swim in the rivers. That's sort of given across the whole country. But if the expectation is going to be on our farmers that they need to pull together all these plans and do all of this effort, then they need the tools to be able to do it. That poor woman I mentioned before that had the non-existent landline and everything. Yeah, she'd rung up this office this week. She was trying to enter her, NATE movements, and there was no way of doing it. Try to call up the call center and her phone keeps breaking down. Can't connect through the internet. Somehow she managed to connect to us one day. But, if there's an expectation around for farmers that have to do all this compliance, then we've got to make it a hell of a lot easier for them to do it. It can't be extraordinarily, the proving you've done something can't be more difficult than the actual doing it. And so that's a a key thing for me. And I think another component with, if we look at water quality and the intersection with connectivity, is we need to know that the efforts we're putting in on farm are actually having a result in water quality. So that means more monitoring all over the country, and that's only going to be done with connectivity. And we need to be monitoring a lot more, and so we're going to need a lot more connectivity. But look, I'll just a couple of highlights from our survey. I'll just quickly go through, and Craig, when I talk too much, tell me to shut up. Wireless broadband.
I'll give you 2 more minutes.
2 more minutes, sweet as. Wireless broadband is the dominant type of connectivity for most farmers, just around half. The biggest complaint was cost, value for money, quality of service. People talking about intermittent and weather affected connections were raised as prominent issues. A lot of farmers through COVID found the experience of unlimited download caps during level 4 to be quite nice. Why can't we carry on with that? And download speeds are of serious concern, with 68% of farmers indicating average download speed is between 0 and 20 megabits a second. So we sort of view 20 megabits a second as sort of benchmark, where that's what we view as decent connectivity. And when we actually broke that down, it got even more concerning that effectively a quarter of farmers that responded to the survey were on 0 to 5 megabits. So that's just absolutely, you can barely do much on that. And then it was 6 to 10 was 20. So 40% of farmers had below 10 megabits a second. And I guess backing up what Rachel had said as well, on the mobile phones, 94% had a smartphone. I think it was 75% that the smartphone supports the business. We asked them to give a ranking of 1 to 10 as to how they rated the smartphone the highest. So 30% gave it a ranking of 10 in terms of how it supports the business. And so it's actually, and the trend we're seeing is that we're getting, on the higher end, we're getting more scores each year as more and more people are taking it, and the people giving it a ranking of 1, 2, or 3, that's dropping away. And so it just shows how important connectivity is, and it's becoming important. I think Rachel, sounds like she's got a very similar farm set up to me. All the exact same things happen on my farm, and when the internet goes, it's a nightmare. Thanks.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you, Andrew. You didn't mention all the number 8 wire stuff that you do around your farm today, which you have in the previous times when it comes to using IoT. We'll get you on another time for that. Hey, look, I want to thank all the panelists, Fiona, Sarah, Rachel, Trevor, and Andrew. Every year I should really give you more time, and I think to hear the stories from rural New Zealand and the things that are concerning you. We're going to take